Hi, folks. Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Welcome to the live stream. And tonight we're going to talk in regards to reference gear. What is reference gear? What is the Honest Audiophile use as reference gear? How often should reference gear be swapped out, if at all? Is reference gear what the reviewer has in currently in for review? Uh, how to select reference gear. Uh, why does reference gear matter? Should we pay attention to what is used as reference gear? All that kind of stuff. We're going to try to discuss this evening. And if you have any questions or comments or thoughts about it, go ahead and hit it down into the chat there in the live stream. And once I get through kind of talking about it and giving my thoughts, we'll go through your questions and comments and see what all we have going on there. But we'll wait for a few people to join. Hopefully you can all hear me okay and everything looks proper and correct on screen. And then we'll get started here in a moment. We do have a couple people hopping on, and we'll give a couple more moments linger in, and then we will start the presentation or the topic or the discussion, so to speak. So if everything is good to go, if you're in the chat and you can hear everything okay and see everything okay, give a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated, and we'll get the show on the road. Hopefully everything's good. Tap the microphone, tap, tap, and make everybody's speakers go crazy. All right. So reference gear. What is reference gear? In theory, it is, if it's a true reference product, it shouldn't be replaced if and at all. It should be a reference product is something that you trust and that you know 100% without a doubt that it is giving you accuracy and it is telling you what other products sound like. You understand it. It's just like reference music. You understand the gear. You understand the music. You know the ins and outs. It might not be your favorite thing to use. It might not be your most favorite looking product or something like that, but you know how it performs and you know why it performs that way. And you know that when you listen to something else with it, you're going to get 100% truth back. You know that's what it should sound like, and that you're hearing how the other things are performing. That's what reference gear is. And in theory, as mentioned, reference gear really shouldn't be replaced very often, if at all. So if you have reference gear in house, it shouldn't be swapping out very often. And why do I say this? Because if you're constantly swapping out reference gear, you're going, this is my reference, this is my reference, I use this one for this month and I use this one for this week. Are you really getting to know that product? And are you really giving things a proper length of time to get to know it, to listen to it, to hear it? If you've been following my channel for a long time, you've noticed in behind me, the only things that really change are speakers. And that's because I'm not really a speaker guy. But the speakers that are behind me right now are the Audiophile D310s. They've been with me for about 3 years, and they are pretty much my reference speaker. I've tried other speakers and I've enjoyed other speakers, but these ones always seem to come back. Also, the Martin Logan's Motion 15s that I have also are my reference speaker. So I have two different pairs of speakers that I really enjoy and that I trust. Right now, the Audiophile are on because my Martin Logan's, my speaker amp isn't working with them very well. So these are the ones that I'm using. Other things that haven't changed very much at all behind me. Mytek Liberty DAC 2 and the Mytek Liberty THA AAA HPA amplifier. Those have been with me for several years. Prior to that, I was using the Mytek Liberty. So I changed to the second one. Why? Because when I listened to the second one, and compared it to what was my reference at that time for several years, I realized the second one is better. It is an upgrade. And it's the only thing that I've heard up until that point that beat it. And so I replaced it with it. The HPA, the same way. When I heard the HPA and I compared it to what was my reference amp at the time, which was the head amp GSX Mini, I listened to that and go, you know what? The HPA is slightly better because it is a little bit more clean and a little bit more clear and a little bit more on the neutral side. And so I replaced it. Then there's some other things that have been added in over time, things that have been reviewed. They aren't necessarily replacing the Mitex, but they are a complement, or they do certain things also that are more of a reference. FIO K19, FIO K9 AKM, X Duo, XAO2, the Burson Playmate 3, and several other amplifiers and various things that you've seen back here. Headphone wise, same thing. Audeze LCD 5s are my reference headphone. IEMs, Westone Mach 60, things like that. They've been standards for a while, but other things have been added into the fold and are used. Some of it is because I didn't have anything to compare in a particular price point, and so these are my references in a price point. Other things they are just really good and they need to be used as a comparison or as a reference. So you pick things based on how they perform and how they sound, but your reference sound should be very similar, and it should be what you believe to be neutral and accurate. And the product should be something that when you listen to it, you know what you're getting back. It's going to perform and it's going to tell you this, this, and this. So let's talk about what my actual gear is that I use and some of the reasons why. Now, oftentimes I get asked, what gear do you use and why when you're traveling? Do you take things along? Do you have reference gear? And the truth of the matter is, I do kind of have some reference gear that I take along, things that I will trust. So if I'm reviewing something that is considered more of a travel or a portable, I do take that along, especially with IEMs and headphones. And so the IEMs that I travel with are actually something that have been around for quite a while. I've had them for about 6 years, and that is the Drop Plus Universals. Now, I'm not going to show everything on screen because it's all, I don't have enough room to set it all out. But anyways, so the Drop Plus Universal, this is an IEM that's been with me about 6 years. And why do I use that when I'm traveling? Well, when I'm traveling, oftentimes I want something that is kind of blocking out noise a little bit. Maybe there's a lot of car noise or plane noise or some sort of travel. Maybe people are just talking. I don't want to be bothered in the car or something like that. But the Drop Plus Universals are very, very good with noise isolation. I find them to be extremely comfortable as well. They fit me like a glove, and so that's the main reason why I take them. They put me in my own little place. They block out a lot of things. And then the other reason for it is they're actually quite pleasant to listen to. They're not truly analytical or neutral by any means. I'm not picky when it comes to travel gear. I'm more looking for a fun sound or just a pleasurable, more musical presentation. And so the Drop Plus Universals kind of fit that. They're sufficiently competent with their detailing and with their sound. There is not unpleasurable in any way. But I just find it to be a very sufficient, competent presentation when I'm traveling, and it's very enjoyable, and it has enough accuracy and technical capabilities. Now, if I'm comparing it to other products, when doing a review for portable, I'm obviously going to compare it to some of my other IEMs that are reference gear, but I'm also going to compare them to the Drop Plus Universals just because that's the purpose for them is, hey, how do they do with noise isolation? How do they do comfort-wise, things like that. Headphone-wise. So for portable use, I have 2 headphones that I use on a regular basis. First one is the Edifier Stax S5. The Edifier Stax S5 is very compact, it's very lightweight, it's extremely comfortable, and I find that it delivers a very excellent sound quality. It doesn't have noise canceling, but it does a lot of other things, for portable, Bluetooth, fast charging, that type of stuff. And the sound actually for the S5 is very, very close to being neutral, and as well as neutral as you could get for a portable device that I have heard. Excuse me. I find that it's very, very, very close to neutral. Also, the app that Edifier includes along with it, you can change it out. So if you want a little more bassy sound, or if you want it to be a little bit more just musical, you can have that. They have monitoring mode, which is the one that I prefer, and that's pretty close to neutral. I actually really enjoy the Edifier Stax S5. And then the other one that I take on travels is the Heavy's H1H. Now, the Heavy's H1H is very much the polar opposite of the S5. It's got big bass, very warm sounding. It's a very enjoyable, fun type of presentation, and the word heavy applies. It's a heavy headphone. It is a big headphone. It is actually still pretty comfortable. I do find it to be, but at the same time, it is rather heavy, so I can't wear it for near as long as I can the S5. I do find that it's not near as musical or neutral as the S5, but it's very fun and engaging. So depending on what type of music I'm listening to, or if I'm watching movies and things like that, the H1H from Heavies is more my pick. And then for DAPs, I use a digital audio player or a DAP pretty much only when I'm traveling. I don't actually use it very often around the house, which is one reason why I haven't done a lot of reviews of DAPs. It's just not something that I use on a frequent basis, but I do use it every now and then when traveling on vacation, because sometimes you don't have good Wi-Fi. Sometimes you don't have service, and so you need some, localized music while you're traveling, especially if it's a long trip, things like that. And so the one that I'm currently using and have been using for about the last year and a half or so is the Hibby R5 Gen 2. Before that was the Sony WM1A. Unfortunately, my Sony passed away. The battery, excuse me, the battery passed away, and I wasn't able to get it repaired as it was an older device. And I just didn't want to shell out the money to purchase a new one. So unfortunately, that one has moved on. All right, so over-ear headphones. Now, if you've been following my channel, I'm known to do reviews of IEMs, but I'm actually a headphone guy. I do reach for headphones a little bit more frequently than IEMs. It's just personal time for myself. I don't mind IEMs, and I love IEMs to be exact, but I really, really love headphones. And I'm going to reach for a headphone more than likely if I'm listening to music or playing a game or watching a video on my own time. So headphones of choice, as mentioned earlier in the live stream, Audeze LCD5. That is my 100% reference headphone. The reason why that is my reference headphone is, for one, it's uber comfortable, super light, and very, very comfortable, especially for an Audeze. But I find also that the sound quality is exceptional. It has a very neutral and natural presentation with precision, very, very accurate in its placement, with excellent depth and layering, and an accurate stage. It also is very, very good with details and resolution. And I find I don't miss anything with the Audeze LCD5. And when I plug it into a source that is in for a review, I can tell how that source sounds and how it performs, because I trust the LCD5. I also know how it performs on my reference DACs and amps, which we'll talk about in a little bit later. And I know that I can trust it, and I listen to it all the time. It's not only my reference amp, it's my preferred personal listening headphone. Excuse me, headphone. Next is the Austrian Audio HiX 60. Now, the Austrian Audio HiX 60 close back headphone is used for monitoring, mixing, and mastering, and it has a very neutral and natural sound. And just like the LCD5, I love using it in those settings, but I also use it on a personal listening level. I really enjoy it, especially for gaming and for movies and musical listening. It does have a slightly forward mid range, and it's a little bit more open sounding than a lot of closed back headphones. And I find that the Hi X60 is amazing for monitoring at church. When I'm running the soundboard and things like that, I really can hear every single thing going on the stage, and I can trust it, and I know where it's all placed and how it's sounding, and it's getting natural timbre back. But also at the same time, when I'm sitting at home listening to music with it, it does a good job with noise isolation, but also at the same time, it does good with placement, and I can just tell where everything is. I really enjoy it in those settings. Another headphone that I really enjoy and use as a reference is the Sennheiser HD660S2. I find that this one is very comfortable. It fits me like perfectly. I have no complaints whatsoever about that headphone. And it's also a very versatile headphone when it comes to different genres of music. I find for being an open back, it's also very competent in its various music genres. It is sometimes open back headphones can struggle with certain genres of music. The 660S2 is pretty competent on all of them. It's very neutral, natural. It also has a nice cohesion to it. And it's a very balanced presentation. And it oftentimes I just find that I just can kind of just like melt into the music and just really enjoy it. The 660S2 kind of jives with me no matter what I'm listening to. Another headphone that I listen to quite often for tracking and monitoring purposes, but not really for personal listening, and that's the Mr. Speaker's Ether C. This is going all the way back before Dan Clark was Dan Clark. It was when Dan Clark had started Mr. Speakers. This is the Ether C, the original Ether C. It's used for reference purposes only. I really don't break it out to listen at a personal level. It doesn't have a whole lot of comfort. I find that it's a little bit snug on my head. It is one of the strangest headphones for fit. I can always tell when I need a haircut when I have the Ether C on. If I'm on the at that time frame when my hair is getting too long and too thick and all that kind of stuff, the Ether C doesn't fit me quite right. It's just something about it, the way that the headband is and the cups and everything. It just doesn't fit me quite properly, and so that's my telltale sign, Dave. You need a haircut. But anyways, so I find that the Ether C, it has really good noise isolation when it's fitting me properly, and it has really good bass extension, a very neutral presentation of instruments and vocals. It is slightly forward, but it also has very controlled treble, and it's very, very good at detail retrieval and resolution. It's very nitpicky of a headphone. It's a very analytical experience, and it carefully and respectfully analyzes each track that it plays. And sometimes you just don't like how that track sounds, and it's going to tell you whether or not it's a good or a bad. It's a very detailed and resolving headphone, but it also can be fatiguing, and that's the reason why I don't always listen to it on a personal level. Another headphone that I really enjoy is the Audio-Technica R70X. Now, the R70X, extremely comfy. It's by far the lightest headphone, along with the R50X that I have. They are like featherweights. You can barely tell that they're on. Does take a little bit with the wing headband thing that they have. And the larger ear cups take a little bit of time to kind of get used to. But the R70X is extremely comfortable. I find it's extremely neutral and natural and a very expansive, deep quality soundstage. And every time I put it on, I'm just wowed at it. And I appreciate every single track that I hear on it. And it's kind of like the Ether C in that it's very detailed and very resolving, but at the same time, it's a little bit more pleasurable and has some more naturalism to it. And then another headphone that's been with me for a very long time is the Sennheiser HD580 Precision. Now, I really enjoy the Precision. This is a black silk, and I really do enjoy listening to it and also for reference music. Now, it's not the most detailed, it's not the most resolving headphone that I use, but what it does have is a neutral, natural tone and timbre. It's very cohesive sound, and it's a balanced presentation. And I often find that if I jive with the 580 precision on a DAC and an amp pairing, that it just kind of tells me that there's something there. This is a good product. The 580 oftentimes just resonates with me on different gear. It's not, the most accurate and the most precise and the most, competent of headphones that I have on my list, but it's just one of those that if I can sit there and kind of be one with the music, so to say, that speaks volumes. Moving on to IEMs. What reference IEMs do I use? Westone Mach 60 has been mentioned many a time on this channel. This is my reference IEM. This is also my preferred IEM for personal listening. I find that it's very comfortable. It has really good noise isolation and sound quality is exceptional. I find that the Mach 60 works well with various types of tips. I do prefer it with a sonic foam tip for more noise isolation. And also I find it to be slightly more comfortable in the ear with foam tips, but it works well with silicones as well. And the sound is very neutral and natural. It has extremely good accuracy in all regards of bass, mids, treble. Soundstage is nice and natural size with good imaging and placement and depth and layering. And I find that the Mach 60 is just, every time I listen to it, and it doesn't matter how many times I've heard the track, I'm just wowed and amazed. And it's one of those IEMs like the Audeze LCD5 headphone that I trust, and I know that's how that gear is supposed to sound. Also, I use the Westone Mach 60 when monitoring at church, and I find it to do an exceptional job in that regard. All right, Thea Audio Oracle Mark III is another headphone that I use often as a reference. To me, it's very neutral and natural sounding, and it has pretty good noise isolation. Even though it's slightly forward in the mid-range, I find that it has a very open presentation, and that it has just a pleasurableness about it, while yet still at the same time being analytical. The Oracle Mark III is one of my preferred presentations when it comes to just overall the way it presents things, with its slightly forward mid-range and its big, powerful, impactful bass, and its controlled but yet kind of sparkly and energetic treble, and its big soundstage with excellent details and resolution and big depth and layering. I really enjoy the Oracle Mark III. And then the Tantrum Origin, I find that that one is one that has recently been added to the list. And for a while, I didn't like the Origin. Then I heard it and started spending more time with it, and the Origin just kind of kept popping up and sitting there and being used. And I find that it has decently good noise isolation, and it's a neutral, natural presentation. It's very cohesive and balanced. And it just, there's those times where it kind of resonates with me, kind of like the 580 Precision, where if it sounds good on a product and it sounds good with the Origin, I know that it's going to be something special and that there's something good here to be explored. Moving on to dongles. So I get asked often, what dongle should I get? What dongle should I use? Which one do you prefer? And there's actually only a couple that I use on a regular basis. And it's probably going to surprise you. The ones that I use are fairly cheap. I use the Fosse Audio DS2. The Fosse Audio DS2 has a lot of power. And it has a very close to neutral presentation. It's about as close to neutral as you can get in a dongle that I've heard, other than some super expensive ones. And I find that it has pretty much enough power for any IEM. When it comes to headphones, not so much, but I really don't drive headphones with dongles. That's not something that I'm doing on a regular basis, walking around with headphones on and a dongle. But I find that the DS2 just has a sound that doesn't alter from the source. It's a very neutral presentation, good details and resolution, a nice soundstage, and it just pairs with everything. And then the Kiwi Ears Allegra Mini. Allegro Mini. The Allegro Mini, is it really a dongle? Not so much. It doesn't have a cable. It just plugs in USB-C. It's this little itty bitty thing, connects to the end of your phone or your DAP. And it's small, has enough power for the majority of IEMs. But what I find is that it has that, just like the DS2, it has that very neutral and natural sound presentation. And every time that I listen to it, the Allegro Mini, I look at the size of it and I go, how did they pack this in? This sound, and it's just so clean, so clear, crisp, detailed. And I get a smile on my face because I'm just amazed at how small it is and how good it sounds. Portable DACs and amps. There are 3 of them that I use on a regular basis. I've talked about these, especially recently. SMSL DS20, very neutral, natural, analytical, powerful enough for most headphones, or excuse me, most IEMs and most easy to drive headphones. It has a super bright light on it, but it's really cool looking with its glass front. I love the DS20, and I use it all the time here at the desk. And if I travel, which I haven't traveled since I got the DS20, I'll take it along and use it. The Death and Ray clarinet is another one that I use. It's a little bit more musical, very natural, very analytical, and a little bit more powerful than the DS20, but it's not quite as neutral sounding. It's more on the musical side of things, but I love the Death and Ray clarinet. And then the Muse Audio M5 Ultra, kind of a hodgepodge of what you want. You know, it has Bluetooth, it has USB, it has a bunch of other things. But the coolest thing about the M5 Ultra, tubes. It has tubes, and it can also go into transformer mode. It has very good power and multiple gain settings. And I find that it has a very neutral and natural sound presentation, especially in transformer mode. Tube mode, it gets a little bit more musical. So if you kind of want both, you know, DS20 and Death and Ray clarinet, you could go with the M5 Ultra and get both the best of both worlds kind of thing. All right, let's move over to desktops DAC. So the DAC of choice, and this has already been mentioned, is the Mytek Liberty DAC 2. I find that, to me, through everything that I've heard, nothing really has beat it that I can afford. And the things that I can't afford that has beat it haven't been good enough and haven't beaten it enough to make me want to save up and purchase it. The Mytek is a reference sound that I trust and that I understand, and I know that it's going to sound. And so even some of the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 DACs that I have heard, they might be slightly better in certain ways, but they haven't been good enough to go, Dave, you need to buy that. And that's important. That's what true reference gear is. And to me, the Mytek Liberty DAC 2 is very neutral. It's very natural sounding, has a nice analytical presentation, very precise, and very accurate, and very true. But yet at the same time, I enjoy it for personal listening. It's not just something that nitpicks. It's something that I use on a daily basis. And then there's the X-Duo XAO2. Why did I get this one? Well, it came in for review, and it has a very neutral, very analytical and natural, precise and accurate presentation. It's not as good as the Mytek, but it's really good, especially for its $200 price point. And so I have it as a $200 price point budget reference. And I use it all the time. Actually, a lot of IEMs get tested on the XAO2. And then another one that I have is the FIO K19. And the FIO K19 is a very neutral, natural, analytical, and precise and accurate, like the Mytek, with a slightly little bit more of a warmer, more musical presentation. It's close to the Mytek, and they're so close that I use them as complements to each other. And I find that these three devices for DACs, and of course they do have amplifiers in them as well, I find that those three really, for me, give me a reference point of a little bit budget, something kind of in price points that I can still afford that haven't been beaten. And then amplifiers, desktop amp, Mytek Liberty THX AAA HPA, Mega Power, has all kinds of functions, inputs, outputs. And the thing about the HPA for me is it's clean, it's clear, and it's neutral. It does not color the sound of what DAC is coming into it, and I can trust it. I know that it's not going to alter the presentation. It's not a warm DAC. It's not a super cold DAC. It's not sterile, or amplifier. It's not sterile. It's just honest. And to me, that's important in an amplifier. Just tell me what the DAC is doing. Don't try coloring things. Just be honest with me. Give me that clarity. Give me that cleanliness. Give me that neutrality. And also at the same time, give me the power. And then another amplifier, which is cheaper because I needed something that was more budget, is another amplifier that performs very similar to the Mytek. And that is the Drop SMSL HO150X. That amplifier is like a mini me of the HPA. Now, I'm not saying it beats it. I'm not saying it's the better one, but they're really close. And it's another amplifier that I can trust. And I have those two amplifiers on my desk, and they get used for every single review. They are my reference. And those amplifiers get used on a daily basis for personal use as well. And that's kind of in a nutshell what gear I use as in reviews and for personal use on a regular basis, and reference gear, why I use it and how I chose it. But the thing that this is something that is kind of grinding for me, and this is going to be a little bit of a touchy spot probably, and this is not meant to offend anybody. This is not to, I'm not going to call anybody out as far as by name, but I'm going to mention this. In reviews, when you watch them, when you read them, pay attention to what reference gear is used. You may not have heard it, but you can do some research, right? You can look it up. You can understand what kind of what people are saying about the gear. Why is that important? Because it will tell you, along with understanding where that reviewer is coming from, what they prefer, and what terms they use and what they believe and how they translate things and how they define things, along with the gear that they use, is going to tell you how they're hearing the product that they're reviewing. But if a reviewer, and this happens all the time, and I see it all the time, reviewers are constantly flipping gear. And if you flip gear often, you're not going to understand how it performs. The gear behind me, as mentioned at the beginning of this live stream, has been with me for quite a while. There's very few of them that just recently came upon. Most of the gear has been with me for years. And why? Because I trust it. And another thing, as mentioned when I was talking about DACs, they don't get beat easily. They still perform even though they're older. To me, if you're constantly changing your review gear, there's a problem. Number one, you really don't have a reference. You don't understand it. You maybe just haven't purchased it because guess what? Oh, I always get it in for review. I constantly am receiving dongles or DAPs or DACs or amps to review, and so I just use those. Problem. Big time problem. Why? For one, you haven't reviewed that product yet, or you're in the process of reviewing it, so you don't even understand it. Second of all, you're using another product to review that you're in the process of diagnosing and learning and understanding. And so, how do you even know what is what? What is supposed to truly sound like? You need to have a benchmark. You need to have a basis and understanding of this is how it should sound, and this is what I expect. If you're constantly changing gear as a reviewer, you aren't going to get that. And as a viewer, you need to understand that. So pay attention to what they use on a regular basis. If you watch a review and then next week you watch another review and they say that this is my reference gear or I'm using it on this one, and then you ask them in the comments, well, how does it sound on this? And they're like, I don't know. I already sent that one back, or that one's been moved on. Problem, in my opinion. Pay attention to what's used as reference gear. It's really, really important. Another thing, reference gear, purchasing it and using it as a reviewer shows your viewers what you like and what you prefer, and they'll understand you more for consistency's sake. Most of the people here in this chat or that watch my channel on a regular basis know what I'm using as a comparison, as a reference, because I've been using it for a long time. Consistency and all kinds of things really matter. And so that rant's over. I'm not going to call anybody out as far as name for channels. You probably know who I'm talking about, but be careful of that. Pay attention to it. All right, let's get to some questions and comments. Saw some come through here. All right, so Quince says to hold on for 20 minutes. Sorry, Quince. The stream had already started. Hopefully you were able to get in. Okay, so you jumped into the chat after notifications. All right, so Geisen Goin, I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm not gonna yeah. The Allegro Mini is great. Also bought the new Fio Snow Sky to see how it compares. Snow Sky looks interesting. I haven't heard it yet. It would be interesting to see. It does have a similar form factor for sure. So the DS2 and the Allegro Mini were both mentioned, both more neutral than the Hibby FC3. So the FC3 is also another one that I do use on a regular basis. The FC3 is a little bit more clinical and a little bit more on the sterile leaning side of things of neutral, whereas the other two have a little bit more natural side of things. I would say the Allegro Mini is kind of a mixture between the DS2 and the FC3 as far as tonality. So I do, let's talk about this as well. So I do use other gear. The ones that I mentioned are kind of just the ones that are my first grabs, or my 100 percenters, I guess you would say. But I do use a lot of others. In fact, I have about 30 dongles currently in my possession that I kind of use, and every now and then grab one. Headphones, clearly you can see this is in all of them that I have. DACs and amps obviously have more. So there's a lot of gear, but there's certain things that I trust. And, if I mention a certain thing and say this is my reference, it doesn't mean that I don't use the others and that I don't like it. There's just certain things that you trust and use more frequently. But yes, so a good question. FC3 I actually like a lot and still use quite often. But it is leaning a little bit more on the cold, clinical, sterile side of things versus the others that have a little bit more of a natural and a little bit more of a full body sound presentation. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Any thoughts about gear maybe that you use as a reference? What is your go-to and why? Thoughts about reviews in general, and whether or not this is something that matters to you. For me, this has been something that has mattered to me since the beginning. In fact, this is one of the things that really got me kind of thinking that I should become a reviewer. Was I was watching a lot of reviews, reading reviews, and I just saw a lot of flip-flopping, a lot of things that would just come in for a review. People would listen to it for a week or two, maybe even less than that, do a review on it, and then it's shuffled off and, into some corner or sent back, or, it's pretty much never mentioned again unless somebody asks them to compare it. And a lot of times things that they used as reference gear would be, in for a month at a time and then just disappear. Um, and, rarely ever would it ever come back. And that was just, to me, very concerning, because consistency is really vitally important when you're testing products. And so, not only is consistency important for your process that you do it, consistency also is important for what you believe and what you understand and what you know and what you use. And so that's kind of one of the reasons why I became a reviewer. Okay, so Rob, you use clumps of gear of equipment that grow over time. Understandable. Do you have certain ones that you always go to though? That's kind of the point that I'm trying to get to tonight. Is there something that that you truly use? That you're like, I know that if I listen to on this one or on this setup, that's how it's supposed to sound, versus just randomly, okay, today I'm using this one, and things like that. Because to me, that's um if you're just kind of going off of whatever's available at the moment, you don't truly understand what that product is. Now, if you have it in house and you're using it on a frequent basis, totally different story. But if it's just this week it's this one, and then it's bye bye, now it's this one, and you're comparing and reviewing things that are coming in the same way, how do you really know what it's supposed to sound like? Okay, so you got the nom or name, Ginty Adam. Is that the core? I never even heard of that. um, there's so much gear out there though. That's kind of cool. All right, let's see. Tried the Allegro Mini Pro. I haven't heard that one yet. In the Celeste CD2, which also have a similar form factor, but curiously, oh, Unity at, okay, that makes sense. All right. Tried the Allegro Mini Pro and the Celeste CD2, which also have a similar form factor, but curiosity, they both had a slight noise floor with sensitive gear. Interesting. So I mean, that sometimes has to do with like output impedance. It could also have to do with USB connections. Sometimes components are too close together and you get some interference. There's a lot of factors that can cause that, unfortunately. I haven't heard the Allegro Mini Pro, so I don't know about that. And the Celeste CD2, I don't know what that is. Sometimes also with dongles, an issue that can be easily resolved is using a different cable. Some cables you get a little bit of interference because they're not well shielded. So you have to be a little bit, try some of the different cables around. Some of them work better than others. Also, sometimes moving the dongle away from your phone or from your laptop or whatever you're using it with also will help. in that regard, getting rid of some. But then some IEMs are just super sensitive and are going to pick up anything. I have a pair like that, so um, there's a lot of different variables in that regard. I am curious, have in your reviews that you guys have watched or read, have you noticed a big turnover when it comes to like reference gear or mentions of what gear is being used to compare things like that? Or is this just something that you don't really notice and it doesn't really bother you? Paulo, the only reference gear that I have is the Topping DX3 Pro Plus and the Dunu DTC 480. Both sound the same to me. DTC 480 is really, really good, the little dongle. I do use that quite a bit. I enjoy that a lot. The DX3 Pro Plus, I don't recall if I've heard that one. I know I heard the 7. Let me go over here to my little list. Topping. Nope, I haven't heard the DX3 Pro Plus. I've only heard the bigger brother, the DX3 or DX7 Pro Plus. Excuse me. Didn't really care for that one. But the DCT 480 is fairly cheap. It's a little about $40 for a dongle, which is fairly cheap. Nice and small. Sounds fantastic. I really like that. It has pretty decent power to it also. Yeah, the 480 is great for more energetic gear. I like it with my Super Mix 4. I haven't heard the Super Mix 4, but I would agree with you that the DTC 480 has a little bit of a warmer, kind of rounded, smoother presentation. And so when you have things that are a little bit, spicy or spiky, it definitely does help with that, for sure. So the Mini Pro, Allegro Mini Pro, is very similar in sound to the original, but has different sound modes. So it has like a DSP type thing through their app. Is that what you mean by sound mode? Yeah, unfortunately, that's a slight issue with a lot of the filters and sound modes that a lot of gear has. They don't always sound um, that different. All right, so any other thoughts, questions, comments, anything like that? Okay, so in the Mini Pro, there's a little button that you click to cycle through. Gotcha. The DTC 800. Oh, I haven't heard that one. I don't use it since it is designed to pair with really high impedance IEMs and headphones. In other words, the volume adjustment isn't fine. Yeah, that that's definitely a problem. I have a few amplifiers that are kind of that way, and you're like one little deek, and all of a sudden it's super loud. The Burst and Playmate 3 is that way with IEMs. It's really loud even on like volume number 1 on low gain with most IEMs. Headphones even, it doesn't take much at all to really drive them and get them super loud. And it's not like it has a ton of power. It's just the output impedance is so high. Another one that's that way is this amplifier down here from Musical Paradise that you have to use impedance adapters with it, or else it is freaky, freaky loud and super noisy with some gear. Yeah, that would be nice. If companies would be able to figure out the filters and sound modes and get them all to kind of make differences and sound good, and be really noticeable. There have been a couple products that have come through over the years, in that way, especially like DACs and amps that I've noticed some differences. But oftentimes that's just kind of like ho hum. Okay, maybe there's a difference. Um, Unless it's really, really drastic, like it totally drops off the bass or something, they can be really hard to hear. It would be nice if a company came around and was able to truly make differences. Um, okay, let's see here. I was curious on the different characteristics of dongles. Is it as simple as higher impedance, resulting in a warmer signature, or is it a chipset thing? Um, I think it's more of a chipset thing. Now, the input, obviously, impedance does affect that. And so, it'll affect IEMs differently. So that's kind of one thing why it's important to understand how a product sounds. So when you plug it in and hear differences, you'll be able to tell if it's affecting it in the wrong way or a good way. Um, but I do think with IEMs, or excuse me, with dongles, DACs, amps, things like that, there's several variables that go into it. Output impedance is one of them. Another one is, like what type of amplifier chip does it have? Op amps. What kind of DAC chip does it have? A lot of those also have some tendencies to it. For me, AKM tends to be slightly a little bit warmer, a little bit more rounded and smooth sounding. Serious Logic and also ESS Saber tend to be a little bit more analytical, a little bit more crisp, and has a little bit more edge and a bite to things. You have Burr Brown, which tends to be a little bit more on the warm side, and there's several others out there. And there are a little bit of tendencies. Every now and then they'll surprise you, but then the thing that really will surprise you is when they pair it with different op amps or different types of technology on the inside that'll kind of alter that, and you'll go, wait a minute, this is an AK. This sounds like, it's got a lot of, it's not as rounded and smooth as some of the others that I've heard in the past, that type of thing. So there's a lot of variables that go into it, but I do think that DAC chips, amp chips, things like that do definitely play a bigger part. And it's kind of like some people say, well, this definitely has BA timbre, or this has planar timbre, just because it has a BA in it, or it is all BA, or it's planar, instead of looking at it as it was tuned this way, you know, um, just because something has a certain technology and it doesn't guarantee it's going to sound that way. It can be tuned different, and there are ways to kind of correct things and overcome some of those hiccups, so to speak. So, um, don't always just assume based on what's inside it. Got to listen to it to truly understand it. There has been a lot of things that have surprised me over the years. Good question. Any others? Pretty quiet today. Not a lot of thoughts on reference gear and how it applies to reviews. I'm just curious. We have um, we have a decent crew in here. Quick poll: yes or no? Does reference gear matter when it comes to reviews for you as a viewer? All right. Well, you all are answering that. Let's see here. Been putting my new Nietzsche check Rockies through its paces this week. I prefer it to the Top Pro because it took the edge and the treble off my ears. Must be the ESTs compared to the Knolls. That is a possibility. Some Knolls, depending on what Knolls are in, I haven't heard either of those, or the Nietzsche check, excuse me, Rockies. Um, some of the BAs can be a little bit on the zippy side. Um, And then ESTs, depending on who made them, they can be a little bit more softer, a smoother presentation, a little bit more extended. But I've also heard some things with some ESTs that have a little bit of spiciness to them. Again, it kind of comes down to the tuning capabilities and the presentation of them. But I'm glad you like the Rockies. I haven't heard them. I like Top Pro. Let's see here. The treble was a little bit more crisp on the Top Pro, and I'm not a first-person shooter gamer much at all. I am more of a sports and racing guy, but I get what you're saying there. At times there was a little bit of just kind of a little too much of a forced presentation on the treble, especially with like car backfires or certain type of background noise that just kind of seemed to be a little bit more forthright in gaming. So I understand where you're coming from on that. All right, Paul says yes. Rob says yes. Good. Anybody else? Is reference gear and knowing it and understanding what there is being used important for reviews? Yes or no? Go ahead and respond for me on there. As mentioned earlier in the live stream, I definitely think it is. so, I'm just curious if you all are. It's kind of a quiet night here in the chat. Everybody busy watching football or traveling home from work or sleeping, depending on what side of the world you're on. Here in the Midwest of the United States, it's 8:57. So I understand if you're on West Coast, it's almost 6 p.m. If you're elsewhere, it could be later or earlier, depending on east or west you are. But I do think that there is a kind of a when it comes to reviews nowadays, reference gear seems to be kind of shuffled backwards. It's kind of put on the back burner. It doesn't really matter. Same thing with kind of reference music. It's kind of whatever you listen to type of thing. Like we spoke about a couple weeks ago, it doesn't seem like there's a big emphasis on the music or on the gear. It's more specifically about how it graphs, how it measures, and the specs, rather than the having a basis and having a benchmark of it. It's more of a, as long as it meets these criteria, it's good type of thinking now. Okay, so Paul. Paul asks, just a bit off topic, have you reviewed any on-ear headphones, and did you like any? All right, so yes, I have reviewed a few. So we had the Roselsa Rose Technics Distant Mountain. Did not care for that. They had another one that was from hold on, I'll have to look it up. Headphones. I have had a couple. And to answer your questions about whether or not I liked them, no. I am not a on-ear person at all. So the other one, Urzatich, the Mania, way too small, uncomfortable. They did sound halfway decent, but I did not care for them, just because they were like torture devices on the head. The ETA headphone, the mini, what was it called? The mini semi-closed. Technically, it's not an on ear. I think it is an over ear. But it wasn't really that comfortable to on my head, and also it didn't sound very good. Um, let's see what else. There was there have been a couple of the closed backs, even some of like the Bluetooth ones that were like borderline on your over ear, like your ear barely fits in the ear cup. Um, and I haven't been a fan of those either. Probably the one that I did care for was a Bluetooth, which was um, hold on, let me dig it out if I can find it real quick. Oh yeah, Bass Audio GR20, terrible headphone. One of the worst things I've ever heard. Um, oh yeah, V Moda. Um, these definitely would be considered on ear. You can get their XL pad, which is not very big. These are the V Modas, and that's with the XL pad on. They're not very big. They were pretty decent. I guess if you could say I like these for an on-ear headphone. Of course, it is a Bluetooth headphone, but yeah. Anyways, all right. There. That's about all that I can think of at the moment as far as on-ears. All right, let's see here. Let's say Apollo. I trust your opinions about how individual IEMs pair with your reference sources. There are people on Reddit who say that all DACs sound the same because it is digital. Okay, so thank you for the kind words. I'm glad that you trust me. I appreciate that. Thanks for saying that. All DACs sound the same because they're digital. Yeah, no. I, to me, that that's not what I hear. There's so many variables. Okay, so decks sound different, amps sound different. A variable that definitely affects that different components. Another variable, your output impedances, your output voltage, and all that kind of stuff. Another thing is the DAC chips themselves. It's not just receiving a number and converting it. It is receiving a number, converting it, and processing it. And it's going through various types of processes, filters, DSPs, all that kind of stuff. And when you're creating a deck, you can choose the tuning, you can tweak it, you can add things, you can add op amps, that type of stuff. So there's a lot of variables. Also, on top of that, how does it, you know, the, if you haven't figured it out yet by watching my channel, that I believe decks sound different, then yeah, it's more than just a number crunching machine, which is how they look at decks. And I laugh at that. All right, so Paul, the reason I asked is I have two sets from Think Sound. I think I heard the Think Sound, the ON ones, back in the day. They are not made anymore. Had the ON one for 10 years, and they're not clampy at all. Closed back wood cups. I think I enjoyed the fit of them. The ON ones, I think I heard them a long time ago. Forgot that those were on ear. I didn't mind those. I think they're kind of like the V Moda. They're like on ear, but just big enough that they, fit. Sound wise, they were a little questionable, especially for what they claimed that they were for. Um, Yeah, Apollo digital. Yeah, right. I chuckle when I see that it's a digital comment. That's what, so there's also the argument that, analog, vinyl, or, some sort of non-digital source sounds better. Um, yes and no. There's pluses and minuses to both. Um, for me, I live in a digital world. Everything gets connected USB. I don't have an analog setup, and you know, my household doesn't really support one. So that's, I, but to say that digital everything sounds the same, you if you make that claim, you haven't heard proper good quality digital sources, good quality digital, you know, sorry, this live stream's turning into rants. um, yeah, that's something that just drives me nuts. When that argument comes along. Okay, let's see. Paul, I thought so. The I sent you the OV21s. They are barely over ear. These two are similar, are smaller and very on ear. Ah, okay. So it was OV21 that I heard. All right. I didn't know Think Sound wasn't around anymore. I didn't realize that. Very interesting headphone to OV21. But yeah, so you know, that's another thing to consider. I guess when it comes to like reference gear and reference what do they use. If they're saying comments like that DACs don't matter, that they don't make a difference, or amps don't make a difference, I'd definitely be questioning, okay, excuse me, what have you heard? And what are you currently using? I'd be like, that'd be the first thing um, that I would ask them. More than likely, and this is just more than likely, they're probably using topping, and they've only used topping. And if you love topping, great. I'm glad you enjoy your gear. Um, I don't enjoy topping. There's been very few topping products that I enjoyed. And the hilarious thing is, my first true setup was a topping setup. It was a D30, like the original, and A30, or D10 and A30. That's what it was. So I had the DAC and the amp, and I enjoyed it for what it was when I first started. But then I heard other stuff, and I heard changes. I heard alterations. I heard a more natural presentation. And the more that I started to hear topping stuff come along, it all sounded the same, which was sterile, dull, and too clinical. And it just didn't have any naturalism to it. And to this day, for the majority, that's how they sound. Um, Jay, totally agree. DACs are only digital on the input side. Music coming in, right? It's a number, and then it converts. And you have DAC chips, you have all the other stuff that you hit, and you can tune and tweak, and it outputs differently. And they sound different for the most part, unless it's the topping, and then they start sounding the same. In fact, I kind of remember a big name reviewer at one point calling topping out because all their gear sounded the same. I wonder if he still feels that way. Anyways, um, So Apollo asks, do you have reference power conditioners for your house, which attach to the ground wiring to a big wooden box, which is filled with dirt and machine shop scraps? Well, so what I did is I dug a trench from my house all the way to the power plant here in town, and I am connected directly there. I have these huge, like they're like 20-foot around cables that run underground all the way to my house, and it's grounded throughout various spots so that we don't have some big surge. And it comes to my house. I have a big, huge power filter outside, and it comes in, and I have it specifically comes to this room, and I plug in two power conditioners on the floor, and then each one of the power conditioners have individualized filters for each socket that gets placed in it. No, I don't have anything like that. I do use a couple power conditioners, which people are probably going to freak out. But they are, let me find my order. Hang on. I don't even remember the name of them. I gotta look them up. Let's see. Oops, not that, not that. One momento, please. I have to find the orders from way back yonder. I ordered them on Amazon. And the nice thing about Amazon is you can do searches for your previous orders from way back yonder. Well, the problem is I have to remember how it's called. Let's see, power conditioner. Okay, so I use, and I've been using them for, let's see, first one I ordered was in 2019, and then I ordered a second one in 2020 because I ran out of room. And they are the Furman PST8. So I have two of those. I don't even know if they're available. They are no longer available. But I use them. They work great. Do I notice a huge difference? Probably not, but I don't have enough outlets to plug in things into the wall to test. Do I trust it more than a regular old standard power supply? Yes. This does have a little bit of, some safety stuff that's protected, and we have had a couple power surges through storms, and this has turned off and saved things. So I do trust it. Is it making a massive difference? Truthfully, no idea. I did a review years ago. IFI sent me a power conditioner thing that was ridiculously priced. And I listened to it and compared it to the Furmans. I plugged things in and swapped them around, listened for a week, and then did the same thing, listened for a week. And I maybe heard a slight difference between the IFI and the Furman. Maybe the IFI sounded a little better. It was so expensive though. I mean, the Furmans were like, I think they cost like $100 um, at the time that I purchased them. So yeah, to me that to me that's not something that I've really explored. Um, same thing with I saw a video come out the other day. I watched it. It was about USB cables making a difference. And basically the conclusion was that USB cables make a difference in the way that they're shielded. And you can pretty much use, you just have to use a decently quality one. Um, Same thing goes with like power cables and things like that. It really comes down to how they're shielded, how they're um, insulated, and that sort of stuff to make a difference. Now, who knows about the higher price stuff? I've never touched it, but I've never done any personal testing in regards to that. Um, to me, that's always been a little bit of hogwash. Yeah, that's where the snake oil type stuff comes into play, kind of for me, and I'm very skeptical. Um, let's see. All right, so Apollo, did you know that you should burn musical CDs at one time speed and not higher speeds, since higher speeds will affect the sound quality? I seriously saw this remark on Reddit. That was a good laugh. So, um, I don't understand how that would affect things. I burn CDs all the time. So maybe that'll be an experiment that I do. It seems highly unlikely that that would affect it, as it's literally a digital file. It's not like listening to a vinyl and recording it at a higher or slower speed. Yeah, I'll have to give that a try sometime if I remember. Um, I mean, my CD player is not even it's fairly old. My burner, and it's not even one of the faster ones. It's like 14 or 15 speed, something like that. All right, let's see. Jay, exactly. You have a big audiophile power supply. It does absolutely nothing to the sound. That's pretty much the conclusions that I've come to. Like I have purchased some, like for fun, when I've had a little extra money. This was years ago. This isn't even recent. I purchased some of those audiophile power supplies and audiophile USB cables um, to use. And did it sound different from the stock one? No. Maybe I'm buying the wrong ones because I didn't want to shell out hundreds of dollars. I only spent like $40 on it, but it said audiophile, and it's got the big, here, I'll show you one. Like this. And it's got this on it. It's got to sound good, right? I mean, it looks cool. Plus it's blue and look how thick it is. Feels like a rope. But wait, that's not even the thickest one. Look at this one. This one's even thicker and more stiff. And it's got this, this has got to sound good, right? Yeah, I really didn't hear a difference. And then I bought, this USB cable back when I had things that were USB-A. I mean, it's stiff, it's thick. Do I hear a difference? No, but it looks cool. Um, I have a couple other USB cables that I paid, some decent money on. I mean, they look nice. That's the thing for me, is if I was going to do like a presentation or go to an audio show and set up some stuff, I'd put some nice cables on it to make it look nice. Am I going to claim it sounds better? No. Why? Because I don't hear it. I don't claim things if I don't hear it. And yeah, there's so much misleadings out there. And even if someone thinks they hear it, oftentimes the problem is they describe it in a way that is just like earth shattering, the world is ending type of news. They're like, this is the cable you need, or this changed my whole listening experience. And in reality, it was maybe a very subtle difference that they heard, but yet to get everybody excited, and that's where the shilling and the snake oiling and all that comes into play. And that's the reason why I'm skeptical. It's like, did it make that much of a difference? Because when I've heard things, it's not that big of a deal. And oftentimes I don't even hear it. Um, there's been some claims I've seen where people are like, I changed out the power cables to my power amp and I instantly noticed a difference. And I'm not saying that this doesn't happen, but oftentimes the way that they're just like super excited about the change, you're like, was it that big of a deal? Because I went to I've gone to audio shows, and I've gone to demonstrations where they change out. We're using this $50 cable, and here's a $50,000 cable, and we're going to change it. And you listen to it, and you kind of know they make a difference because you hear the clicking when swaps over, or they try to blend it, so you don't hear it, and you're like, if there's a difference, it's so minuscule. But yet there's people sitting there go, oh, wow, what a difference. And you're just like, mm. If you hear it and you're happy to spend the money, go for it. For me, it ain't worth it. As I said earlier in the live stream when I was talking about reference gear and things that have been more expensive that have come in and maybe beat my reference gear, it's not to the point where I'm going, I have to buy that. That's so good. I have to buy it. The only time that happened was when I had the Mytek Liberty and the Mytek Liberty DAC 2. Those are the only one that I said I need to upgrade because there is a difference. I already bought the HPA and the GSX Mini I already had when I heard it, and then I heard the difference, and that's when I sold the GSX Mini. It wasn't something that I heard and then went and purchased. I actually had both of them in at the same time. I had purchased both of them. So very rarely does things come in which I hear that difference and it goes, you have to buy it. You have to upgrade. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that things aren't better. It's just not good enough to make a change, if that makes sense. I'm sorry about tonight. It just seems like it's kind of gone into rant mode a little bit for me. But stuff like that just kind of, it's digital, so it doesn't make a difference. Or all DACs sound the same. Or change out this cable or change out this, do this, and you'll get a big difference. Or it only has BA, so it's going to have BA timbre. Well, for one, what is BA timbre? And two, just because it has BA timbre doesn't mean that they are all BAs, doesn't mean that you can't tune it to kind of get quote unquote BA timbre out. Or it's planar, so it's going to have planar timbre, or it's going to have this tendency. Maybe they can tweak it and make it sound a little different. Listen to stuff, hear differences. Stop grading stuff before you even hear it and just looking at a number on the box. It drives me nuts. All right. Back in the 1990s, when we were a little younger, Apollo, a device was being sold which shaved the outer edge of CDs. What? Why would you even want to do that? It was claimed that this improved the CD sound quality. A reviewer at an audio magazine actually bought into the hype. Wow. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. How's that even a thing? If anything, you would damage it and make it sound worse because you broke it. Because I mean, you can get the slightest scratch on a CD, and the thing will skip, jump, jitter all over the place, right? How would shaving the edges, making it more rough or then I don't know, not cause problems in the CD player. Wow. I also remember the thing where they had the repair kits where you could repair the CDs. Has anybody tried those and actually gotten it so it doesn't skip or sound better? Um, because I tried those where you know it puts like that solution stuff and seals it back together. I don't know if you guys remember this way back in the day. Um, it's supposed to buff out the scratches. My CDs always sounded worse afterwards or the same. It never improved the sound, and they still skipped. Maybe I was doing something wrong. Exactly, Paul. If you shave the edges, it would throw the balance off. It would make it not fit into the player properly. It could potentially crack the CD. Um, all kinds of stuff. Ah, well, maybe that's the problem because my CDs were all like, I was a teenager. I was dropping them on the floor. They'd get on the floorboards of the car, all kinds of stuff. So apparently those CD cleaner repair kit things only work for fine scratches. Mine never had fine scratches. It was always like somebody took a Brillo pad to my CDs. So that may explain it. Let's see. Yeah, I had that too, Jay, where you have one that looks absolutely destroyed and you play it in and no problem whatsoever. And then you get one with you can't even find a scratch and it's like skipping all, all over the place. You're like, what? What's going on? Why is this one borked and the other one isn't? Totally agree. CDs are very finicky, especially in older CD players. They were really bad at it. And then you also had the ones like I don't know if you ever used like your PlayStation 3 for a CD player or your Xbox for a CD player, and you would have some that would play flawlessly in your PlayStation or your Xbox, and then you would get other ones you put it in and it'd be like pristine and it wouldn't read it at all. Same thing with games, it wouldn't read the games properly. And then you'd go to another CD player and you'd have the reverse. If it played well in one, it wouldn't play good in the other. It was just a mess. CDs were, I had a really large collection for a long time, and then I got rid of it. Really honed, like shrunk it down, and downloaded a bunch of stuff. And over the last year or two, I've kind of started to collect again and bring some in. Um, but normally I just listen to it, download it, and pass it along to a friend. I don't have a ton of room to store CDs anymore, so usually I just burn them, download them. Oh, that could be a problem. Definitely, Paul. He has CDs that they had to deal with the heat and sand while he was deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. Some cleaned up, some didn't. Yeah, that definitely would cause problems. Also, if you had like I lived in New York, I'm a New York kid. It's where I grew up, just outside of Buffalo, and so you would leave your CDs in the car, and it'd be frigid cold. And then during the summer months, New York, it's really humid. And so you'd have issues like that. But just leave your collection in the car. And it definitely messes with CDs. They don't really warp, but it affects the way that they play. Yeah, definitely Apollo. It depends on how new or old the optical pickup is. Atmospheric pollution slowly contaminates the polarized gratings within the pickup assembly. Um, for sure. I totally understand that. Um, I did notice because I had a PlayStation that I got refurbished, so it had to be like because the optical reader was going bad, and so they replaced it and several other the parts, and the thing worked like it was brand new. I was like, wow, man, this thing's crazy. It wasn't. running smoothly. It took forever to load games and stuff like that. Um, so that for sure affects things. But to claim that if you shaved off the little bit of edging on a disc would make it sound better just baffles my mind. Um, how? That no. So many crazy thoughts out and about with from people, ideas that they've come around. Um, and I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that they didn't experience it, and that they didn't hear it. I'm not saying that. If you heard it and you claim it, I'm going to trust that you did. But I'm going to be skeptical at the same time. It's just, there's just it's a little too, a little too far fetched for me to understand sometimes, I guess. So I guess the moral of the story is I need to buy high-end USB cables, high-end interconnects, some super expensive like XLR cables and all that type of stuff, power supplies, power cables, and I need to get USB filters and power filters and all that kind of stuff. Put it on my desk, do it all on video, record it all for you, maybe do it live, and give you my impressions of how it sounds and how different it is and whether or not I like it or not. Is that what you're all saying? I, well, hey, vegan, thanks for swinging by. Yeah, I mean, it's just nuts. There's just so much. I, I do believe that you need to stay within your means, and that you can find a happy sound within whatever you can afford. Don't go into debt to pursue it. And I honestly, through my experiences, oh, we'll get to that in a moment. I honestly, through my experiences of listening to the gear over the last 7 years, I've been a reviewer and going to audio shows, going to friends, and listening to various things, experiencing it while running sound booths at churches and doing all kinds of other activities, audio wise. There are differences out there, but really just spending more money in it is not how you hear the difference. And there's not really that massively huge of a difference when you start spending big money. And to me, it's not worth it. That's my honest opinion. That's not to say it doesn't sound good. That doesn't say that I didn't enjoy some of it. That's just to say, logically, stay within your means. If you have a ton of money that you can just throw at things, or you find superbly excellent sales and you're happy with spending it, go for it. But I highly doubt that you're going to be any happier than you are with what you currently have if you're content right now. If you have your reference gear all settled already, you're probably not going to find something that just absolutely blows your mind. All right, so along with purchasing USB cables, interconnects, power cables, power supplies, rewiring my house, and all the filters that need to go on each individual socket, I also need equipment vibration isolators. Yes, I need to get, I need to, do you go with wood? Do you go with, some sort of stone? Do you go with some sort of, foam? What do you do? Also, you have to have room Sound isolations, you know, you have to have the type of flooring has to be redone. You can't have like carpet. It needs to be like some sort of wood composite type thing. You gotta make sure your windows are treated so you don't get reverberations off of those. You gotta make sure that you have a steady temperature in your room. You can't have it to be, elevated if the sun's out or if it's in the evening. It needs to be a steady temperature at all times. The lighting has to be perfectly at the set the mood the same every time you sit down to listen. There's so many things I have to get done. And I thought I was there. I thought I had my reference set up and I was. Oh, the metal in your eyeglasses, well, if they're plastic, mine are plastic, can affect the magnetic fields in your IEM, dynamic driver magnets. Should I start selling audiophile glasses? You know what? So, hang on. I never thought I would get these out again. Ocuclips. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but there's already a fix for it, but maybe you can make glasses out of this material. So you have this, like foamy stuff that you slide it on your glasses, you know, and it helps with comfort, but it'll also, I mean, it will kind of protect your glasses from, magnetic, you know, fields and all that kind of stuff. So, if you made your glasses out of this terrible material and you just had this material for all of the glasses, I mean, it might look a little weird on the front, but who cares? You're going to be hearing, perfectly. So maybe they just need to make glasses frames out of this stuff. Don't miss snake oil, whatever. Super uncomfortable, very annoying, and it affected the seal of headphones. Ocuclips are a waste of money. Whoever invented these invented them for themselves. They were like, I don't like the way it fits. I don't like the way my glasses feel when I'm wearing headphones. It's annoying. I need a fix. And so he came up with a fix for himself. And then he goes, everybody needs these. And I want some money and I have a great idea. And so he was able to sell these and get a name put on them and make a business out of it. Biggest snake oil product that I've come across. Dumb. It's stupid. It's uncomfortable. Every headphone that I used with it had a worse seal. And the whole purpose of those was for comfort and to help with the seal. And they did the total opposite. Anyways. But maybe if the whole glasses is made of it. Or IEMs. By the way, they were super uncomfortable with IEMs too. Because the cables, weren't fitting properly. And it was like pushing the ear. Oh, it was terrible. Anyways. Obviously, I become a bit unstable on Friday evenings. No worries. You're just releasing and relieving from your Friday, your week, and I understand that. I enjoy having some fun and just making fun of some stuff, and just discussing ideas and thoughts. Live streams like this are an enjoyment. I, Hopefully, the beginning of it was helpful. Going back and seeing what reference gear I use and why, thoughts about why reference gear matters, and that type of stuff. So if you're joining us late, watch the beginning later on, if you're curious about that. But yeah, there's there are a lot of weird ideas. And there's a lot of interesting ideas, and it's, I don't want to say that throwing an idea out there isn't good, isn't what you should do, because you should, you should, and we should be open to people's impressions, people's opinions. But there are just some that you're just going, okay, thanks for your input, but yeah. That one's for file 13, that one's for the bin. That one's, let's expand upon that. Let's develop that. And then there's others that are just like, Eureka, you've struck gold. This is a genius idea. This is, a thought. And tonight we've kind of covered all those bases. But as mentioned earlier, there's so many things that I have experienced and so many things I haven't experienced. But the and I have an open mind about it all as I experience it. But oftentimes there's just not enough of a change one way or the other to convince me that it's really making that big of a difference and it's worth it. It's you get to this point where you're content and you're happy with what you have, and you have this reference and you know how it should be. And when other things come around, they may sound slightly different, they may perform slightly different, but it's not to the level of your reference gear. And that's what you all should be aiming for. And as mentioned right at the very beginning, I'm going to say it again before I head off tonight, is that in theory, a true reference product, it shouldn't be replaced often, if at all. If it's truly your reference, it should stick around for quite a while. So we got about, we'll go to 10 p.m. tonight. We'll do a 2-hour live stream. My wife is probably asleep out on the couch anyway, so we'll give you about 15 more minutes of wacky ideas from Apollo, or thoughts about reviewing gear and things like that, or just overall whatever else you want to talk about. So it is interesting. We've been talking about various things. I saw I don't remember if it was a write-up or a video about experiences for people, based on whether or not they wear glasses. And so it kind of got me to try it out, listen with glasses or without. Now with IEMs, it doesn't matter for me. I have, obviously the cable's gonna still fit over the ear. Headphone wise, I was really curious, especially when I did the Ocuclips type of thing. And so I started to pay attention when I had headphones on without glasses and with glasses. And for me, I don't notice a difference. Most of the headphones that I have fit me very well with or without glasses, and I don't notice a difference of seal or sound wise. Some of them are more comfortable without or with, but I don't notice a sonic difference. If I don't have a good seal wearing glasses, I don't have a good seal without my glasses. My glasses aren't super thick and big and bulky, and so I do wonder if maybe some of the people that were making claims about that had glasses that were more bulky, bigger. I don't know. Yeah, it just kind of struck me as not something that I've noticed, but I'm not saying that other people haven't. As Vegan said, he normally removes his glasses when using headphones. For me, I can't, I can barely see without my glasses on. So I tend to keep them on. Now, if my eyes are really tired or, things like that, and maybe my allergies are really acting up, I might take my glasses off. But for the most part, my glasses are on. So that was kind of one of those studies, kind of informational type things that kind of was like, I don't know. But, again, I'm just one person. And then in regards to, as I already mentioned, like the various electrical stuff, changing things like that, I really haven't noticed much of a difference at all. Um, which is one reason why I haven't really pursued it. Two, it's expensive. Um, and three, the times that I did hear it, I didn't notice enough of a difference to go, I need to pursue it. Um, Most of the differences that I've heard have already been, mentioned in DACs, amps, headphones, IEMs, and speakers. Obviously music makes a difference as well. Um, Stuff like that. But the real thing that when it comes to reference gear, before you just start shopping around, is you have to understand what you're seeking and what you want out of your reference gear. What sound signature you're looking for. Um, because if you don't have a preference and a reference for what you believe is neutral, you're just going to kind of search endlessly, and hopefully one of the times you'll strike gold and go, oh, you know but more than likely you're just going to keep on cycling through because you don't know what you're looking for, and when it does come around you didn't realize it because you didn't know. um so make sure that you understand what you're seeking. Now, ear tips is something that I'm actually really considering talking about on live stream, in a topical form, because ear tips, I do have a few that I use on a regular basis, and that I prefer, and ear tips make a big difference. And they can really enhance or um, destroy a sound signature, for IEMs, and pads also on headphones can do it as well. I don't change pads near as much as I do ear tips for IEMs. For one, easier process usually. Two, I don't have a whole lot of pads. It's just not something I have really um, pursued. I have some, but for the most part, I do stock ear pads only, unless they're super uncomfortable. Um, but that is something I am considering for sure to discuss in the future. Um, but if there's one thing from this whole live stream that I want to emphasize, that is, know what your reference is. Make sure before you really start to dive into, I'm going to buy reference gear, don't just buy it because it says it's reference gear or a reviewer says this is reference gear. um, Understand what you are seeking and what you believe is going to be your reference and how it should sound, and then purchase it and buy it based off of that, and find it. Because once you find it, if you know what you're seeking, once you find it, you'll know it. And that's the reason why my stuff has stuck around, because I knew what I was looking for. So that's why I really push for you. Understand what you're seeking and buy it accordingly that way. And then use it in that regard, knowing this is the standard, this is the reference that I have, and compare everything else to it. Okay, so Mr. Stubby, Hey Dave, if you find a pair of tips that work on one IEM, would it be safe to say they should work on most others? So here's the thing. I don't believe that. And kind of going back to what I said about reference gear constantly flipping, and a lot of reviewers don't have a set up. This is my reference gear, and they've used it consistently for a while. I find that a lot of them will use one pair of ear tips. I prefer this ear tip, and they use that one in all their reviews of IEMs. And that's a problem for me because ear tips affect differently. So just because let's throw out the final audio type E tip, okay, pretty common tip. Just because you prefer it and the way it feels in your ear does not mean it pairs well with every single IEM. You may it may sound good with some, but others it'll sound super bassy or extremely mid forward. And then in others it will sound very even and balanced. It kind of depends on the IEM, and that's why I recommend really trying a lot of different ear tips and finding the one that sounds correct with it. Sometimes that's stock tips, sometimes that's others. So I'm very much against just using one tip for everything. Um, have multiples in different types of stuff, and even if they're similarly shaped, like for example, this one, there's a lot of tips that are kind of like that half olive or half grape shape. Just because they're all shaped the same does not mean they sound the same. Materials make a difference. The stem size makes a difference. There's all kinds of different things. Another thing that makes a real big difference in ear tips is you use in your ear. For me, I'm mostly a small ear tip person, but I do use some mediums. Larges do not fit me at all on anything. Foams, I'm very, very sensitive to the different sizes of. And that makes a huge difference. And another thing that makes a difference is the length of them. Um, and also another thing that's really starting to become common with ear tips as of late is they're putting filters in the ear tips. There's the soft ears UC titaniums. There's also Shanling has the EM1s, I believe it is. And there's several others that have different filters that built into it. That makes a huge difference. So there's so many different things that you can use. Um, so I recommend buying wide bore tips, buying narrow bore tips, buying something that's medium, different lengths and things like that to fit on to IEMs and try them. Because if you just set it on, I like this tip, this one's always comfortable for me in using it. It may be comfortable in your ear, but it may not pair up with that IEM properly, and it may be causing other issues. So do be aware of that. Not only for yourself in your personal listening, but also in reviews themselves. Look at what tips people use when they're doing reviews. That will tell you a lot about why they say certain things and why they hear it a certain way. Yes, vegan ear tips are absolutely earphone dependent, in my opinion. And you know what? They will also change versus users. So, we may use a different tip, but we may also come across in saying this IEM is neutral. This has a very balanced and cohesive sound, but we're using totally different ear tips. And that's because our ears are shaped different, built differently, and we have different sensitivities to things. So we do hear things differently, and it gets affected by ear tips. Let's see, Jay. Personal sound preference is often overlooked. My son has heaps of headphones from cheap Sony's to Austrian Audios Composer to Fostex Hi-Femins, and I prefer the cheaper Ananda Nano. Yeah, absolutely. There is a significant importance to understanding in reviews what the reviewer prefers and why. If you don't understand the reviewer and where they're coming from, you're not really going to understand the review. And that's a big problem. A lot of times you just ask a question in the comments and you'll get a blanket response. You don't get a true this is why I prefer this type of thing. But get to know the reviewers. Ask questions. You know, what gear do you use? What gear? Why? Why do you use this one? I'm curious as to what your reference gear is. See what they say. Because and ask them what they prefer as far as sound signatures and music wise and things like that. Because the more you understand about a reviewer, the more you're going to understand how and why they came to the conclusion that they did. And you're going to be able to make wiser decisions. That's that's so important. Is oftentimes, and I get this often in comments. People, why'd you say it this way, or what does this and this, and it's, hey, I have this write up. I did this video. This explains this or that. Check this out. I highly recommend that you go and you watch this playlist. It explains why I believe what I believe. The information is out there for me. I don't know if it is for other reviewers, but ask them. Get to know them so you understand where they're coming from. You might really enjoy their presentation style or their personality, or you might not. But once you get to know what they prefer or what they think or something, you might go, oh, okay, that explains a few things. And that's not to say you can't still watch the review or anything, because I'm very much about watching reviews and getting information. You can always learn things, but understand where they're coming from. That's the key. Because 10 people could say a certain product is neutral, and 10 people could, agree upon it, but when you listen to it, you don't hear it as neutral. Why did those other 10 people say it is? Why did those reviewers say that? Neutral can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So make sure you understand where they're coming from. Apollo, are there IEMs which, after you have finished reviewing them, still stay on your desk as go-to IEMs for your personal enjoyment? I'm not asking for a list, just yes or no. Yes, there is. In fact, I mentioned that at the beginning of the live stream when I was going through some of the products that I use. Some of them are personal. IEM-wise, things that have stayed on my desk for personal use, plus our reference, Westone Mach 60, Tantrum Origin, the Audio Oracle Mark III, Katori Zephyr, and a few other things like that have stayed on my desk. Same thing with headphones. There's ones that are easier to grab than others, and that's because they're a reference, and I prefer to listen to them for like on-the-go type stuff. But most of my reference stuff, for the most part, I will grab just to listen to. The only ones were mentioned earlier was like the Mr. Speakers Ether C. I'm probably not going to grab those to do some personal listening. Mr. Stubby, do you still have the Bellari equalizer? I do not. That was a loan. I had to return those. I do have some Bellari stuff in that I'm going to be reviewing in the future on the channel that was sent over. I still like Bellari, but that stuff was loaned. I wasn't able to keep it. Their little tone control, I can't remember the model number, is actually pretty good. I really liked the way that it was, how it crossed over, and it really added in some nice tonality. Had good power to it too. I like Bellari products. The one amplifier of theirs was a little bit on the cold, brittle side, but for the most part, all the others were pretty good. All right, well, I said we were going to go to 10 p.m. Eastern, and that time is quickly approaching. I'm sure my wife is probably ready to go to bed. She's pretty tired tonight, so I should end this so she can start getting ready for the evening. But anyways, thank you for everybody swinging by. I do greatly appreciate it. Thank you for all the questions, comments, and the thoughts, and hopefully, hopefully at the beginning where it talks about a lot about the reference stuff, it'll kind of guide you along and give you some things to at least consider and think about. So I do appreciate everybody swinging by. We'll do this again next week. Not exactly sure what we're going to review next week at this time. And then that'll be to be determined in the next couple of days. And also I'm going to do another poll about what to review on Wednesday. So be looking forward to that on the channel. And with all that being said, do appreciate everybody coming by. Thank you for all the questions and comments. And don't forget to check out all the links down below, all kinds of information down there. Also, you all know all that kind of stuff. And before we get to the finger in the screen, don't forget that honesty is the best policy, and to enjoy the music, and have yourself a great night.